right, Emily. Now? You're good to go out.
Do you want me to go first, Mario?
Actually, go ahead, Brenda. Yep.
Okay, yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Hernandez, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Weingart East Los Angeles YMCA. Welcome to the first of 4 Women Empowerment Panel discussions hosted by Comerica Bank and the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. Today's panel will feature female leaders discussing the importance of closing the Latina pay gap. It will highlight Latinas Equal Pay Day, the day when Latina women pay catches up to that of their white non-Hispanic male counterparts from the previous year. So on October 21st, 2021, Latina workers will have finally caught up to what their white male counterparts made in 2020. Latinas earned approximately 54 cents on the dollar of white men, which means they experienced the largest gender wage gap, causing them to work an additional 10 months to make what white men make. As a result, the wage gap doesn't only impact the individual, it affects their family. But regardless of their family status or obligations, Latinas deserve pay equity to their male counterparts, and anything other than that is unacceptable. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Emily Aviat. Emily Ludmila Aviat is a proud member of the Board of Directors of the Los Angeles Metropolitan YMCA. She is counsel in the Los Angeles office of Skadden, an American multinational law firm. At Skadden, Emily focuses her practice on white-collar criminal defense, U.S. and multinational investigations, and related complex civil litigation. She has experience representing corporate and individual clients from around the world on some of the largest, most significant white-collar matters of their kind. Emily also serves as the coordinator of all Skadden pro bono legal efforts in Los Angeles community, and has personally handled a variety of pro bono matters with a focus on fair housing, defending immigrant clients against deportation. A native Spanish speaker whose family is from Lima, Peru, Emily often works closely with clients, attorneys, and experts in Spanish to execute coordinated cross-case solutions so that nothing is lost in translation. Emily received her JD from UC Berkeley School of Law, her master's in philosophy from the University of Cambridge, and her BA from Harvard University. She has 2 daughters, ages 10 and 3, and lives with her children and her husband, who is also a lawyer in Hollywood. Emily, I'd like to officially introduce you and have you take it away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Brenda, for that introduction and for your leadership at the Y. And I am excited by today's panel because we'll get to learn from some incredible women who are truly making a difference in California and the world at large and are really raising the bar for all of us. And so without further ado, I will introduce our panelists. First, we have Senator Maria Elena Durasso. Maria Elena is a member of the California State Senate representing the 24th State Senate District, which encompasses Central and East Los Angeles. She was born the 7th child of a family of 11 children to migrant worker parents. Growing up, Maria Elena traveled with her family, following the crops throughout California and Oregon, and experiencing the exploitative conditions and hardships that migrant laborers suffer. In spite of the obstacles, Maria Elena attended St. Mary's College in Moraga, California, and in college, she became involved in the Chicano movement. Then she entered the labor movement as an organizer for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, later called Unite. While working as a union organizer, she pursued an education in law at the People's College of Law. By 1987, Maria Elena was ready to lead a drive by the rank and file of Here Local 11 to make the union more responsive to its majority Latino membership. The organizing drive successfully instituted a shop steward system that educated the rank and file on their rights. Workers were now able to participate in negotiating their union contracts, and all meetings and publications were from then on bilingual. In 2004, she became the executive vice president of Unite Here International. And in 2008, she served as the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Hello, Senator. I was just introducing you.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning. And here's Maria Elena. She was married to the late union leader Miguel Contreras, who served as the executive secretary treasurer of the Los Angeles Federation of Labor. She has 2 children, Mario and Michael Contreras, Welcome, Maria Elena. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
And next we have Professor Angelica Gutierrez, PhD. Angelica earned her BA in Political Science and Sociology at UCLA, her MPP at the Gerald Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan, and her PhD at the UCLA Anderson School of Management. After obtaining her PhD, Angelica was awarded a postdoctoral fellowship and visiting scholar appointment at the University of Michigan's Stephen Ross School of Business and National Center for Institutional Diversity. Her research interests include diversity and inclusion in universities and in the workplace, gender and cultural differences in negotiations, and employee recruitment, selection, and retention policies and practices. At LMU, Angelica teaches leadership and the core management class at undergraduate and MBA levels. She was recently one of 10 faculty recognized as an outstanding professor by Kappa Alpha Theta. In addition to teaching and research, Angelica enjoys volunteering with various organizations. In recognition of her community leadership and contributions, she was one of 10 Latinas in the US recognized as the next generation Latina by Latina magazine. Additionally, Angelica was one of 20 Latinas in the US named a Latina of Influence by Hispanic Lifestyle and received a Positive Impact Award. Welcome, Angelica.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Areli Quirarte. Areli serves as Senior Vice President of Music at Paramount Pictures, where she oversees music creative and production. With a passion for innovation and storytelling, Areli fuses current music trends and artists to develop cross-promotional approaches to expand a project's reach. She spearheaded the partnership with Neon 16 and tapped Tiny to executive produce the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run soundtrack. The soundtrack's first single, Agua, featuring J Balvin and Tiny, has digitally accrued over 1 billion streams combined and has become a viral sensation with the Agua Challenge and was Vivo's #4 most viewed music video. Prior to joining Paramount Pictures, Areli spent 12 years at 20th Century Fox Films, where she served as music executive producer for Fox Searchlight and Fox 2000. Areli has helped shape the music on numerous films and was instrumental in the music campaign for The Shape of Water, where she worked alongside Guillermo del Toro and Alexandre Desplat to produce the Academy Award-winning score. Areli's collaboration with Dion Warren and Chrissy Metz for the movie Breakthrough led to an Academy Award nomination for Best Song. Additional credits include Can You Ever Forgive Me, Battle of the Sexes, the Maze Runner franchise, and the Book of Life. Areli was born in Guadalajara, Mexico, and immigrated to the United States at a young age. She found an interest in film and TV while spending time as an extra on set, which prompted her to pursue a career in entertainment. She graduated from Cal State University, Los Angeles, with a broadcast journalism degree and landed an internship with Univision Network, serving as a production coordinator for Despierta America. The opportunity later led to a freelance producer position for the network's news program, Primer Impacto. In 2019, Areli was recognized as a powerful and influential Latina by the Imagen Foundation for her continued support of underrepresented voices in the film and TV space. Areli states that her ability to understand the language and culture allows her to connect with stories on a deeper level. Welcome, Areli.
Thank you. Buenos días.
Buenos días. So, as everyone can see from these illustrious ladies' amazing bios, you are all so accomplished in what you do. And I've been told we have about 1,000 or at least 1,000 young high school students here with us today. And I gave a little flavor of this in your bios, but I wanted to know, what was your very first job and how did you get into your current fields? Maria Elena, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. And good morning to all my sisters and brothers. It's really very cool and very special to hear what you're all going to say and what you've been through in your lives and your journeys. Good morning to everyone who's listening. My first job was working in the fields, picking grapes and cotton and peaches and all the good things that we eat and that our communities rely on and our society relies on. And who would have ever thought that from there, I would be a California state senator representing Central and East LA. But it was a very important journey in my life with our migrant farm worker family, my father teaching us the work ethic. No matter what you do, no matter what job you have, no matter what you pursue, you work your darndest. You just work hard. And that's helped. And sometimes it's hurt because you should be demanding more as you work hard. And that wasn't always, part of the equation. But through my union work, we created a program for our housekeepers and dishwashers and cooks to get involved in the political process, since so many decisions are made in the political process, from schools to our streets to the connectivity and all the things that are so important in our lives. So by doing that, I got involved in the political arena as well and helped to elect a lot of people, helped to make change in the political process. So even though I always said no to anyone who suggested I should run for office, I always felt I was part on the side of helping other people get elected. When the person who won the election for president in 2018 was extremely upsetting to me, and I decided that I should jump into the political arena. So it was a long process. It's much later in my life to have run for Senate, but I'm really glad and excited about doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. And demanding more. That's why we're here today on Latina Equal Payday. That's working hard and demanding more. Angelica, can you tell us about your first job and how you came into your career in academia?
Sure. So my first job was actually unpaid, and it was helping mom. She went to heaven a year ago now. May she rest in peace. But one of the things that she did just to make ends meet was stuff envelopes for Prudential Insurance Company. So my first job was helping her, fold some of these marketing or promotional materials and put these items into envelopes. So that was technically my first job. In terms of how I got into academia, it was just, I'll be very open with all of you. It was just very random. So when I got to UCLA, I had every intention of going to law school. I wanted to become an attorney, just like Emily. So as most people do as undergrads, my undergraduate major was political science. And I actually double majored political science and sociology. So I was totally set on going to law school. But when I was at UCLA, one of my, so my work study position was as a peer advisor. So as a peer advisor, I primarily met with, they were mostly freshmen and sophomore, first generation college students, just like me. Most of them were Black and brown. And so what I thought was interesting when I first got my roster of these students is that most of them were business econ majors. And so I remember being puzzled, and I went to my supervisor, my counseling supervisor. I'm like, hey, I think you made a mistake. You gave me this roster and like 99% of the students are business econ majors, but I'm obviously political science and sociology. And he just laughed and he's like, let me look at your roster. He's like, yeah, I didn't make a mistake. These are your students. And so, I just did my best to research what courses they should take and to ensure that they fulfilled their requirements. And I have to say that as an undergrad at UCLA, my biggest highlight was actually meeting all of these students for the first time. So they would come into the counseling office the first week of the quarter. UCLA is a quarter system. And they would always say, oh, Angelica, I'm so excited. I want to be, a Fortune 500 company executive. Or I want to launch my business someday. So that was during the first week. And then right after their midterm, they would come back into the office. And the first question they would ask me is, Angelica, what do I have to do to switch majors? And so I remember were. Most of them were, Latinos and African Americans. And I was like, wait a minute, whatever happened to going into the business field? And they would all give me the same response. They're like, you know what? I just had my midterm and I totally bombed it. So anyway, I would advise all of them, go see your professors during office hours. Half of them would just blow me off and say, no, I don't feel comfortable going to see my professors during office hours, right? They obviously felt very intimidated. The other half would go to visit their professors and ask them, for suggestions on how to improve their performance. But then these students would come back to my office and then they would say, you know what, they seemed like they were in a rush. They didn't really seem interested in helping me. I don't think they really understand some of the challenges that come with being a person of color, first generation college student. And so what they were telling me in so many ways is that the professors couldn't really relate to them because most of them were old white men. And so it was just hearing those stories that literally one day I decided I'm going to go to business school, get a PhD, and become that business school professor that these students deserve. So very much like that movie, I don't know if you watched it, Legally Blonde.
Yes.
How one day she's like, I'm going to go to law school. She wanted to go to law school because she wanted to win her boyfriend over. So yeah, it was just one day I decided I'm going to go to business school. No idea what that was going to entail. I had never taken a business class before in my life. But yeah, it was just wanting to be that professor that I felt that these Latino students and Black students deserved. So.
Wonderful. Well, a little different trying to win your students over with a business degree than trying to win your boyfriend over. But good thing that Elwood, found a greater calling.
Yes.
Thank you, Angelica.
Sure.
And now, Areli, can you tell us about your first job and how you came into the entertainment industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had two first jobs. I'll talk about my second really quickly, but my second job was working at Lorena Pharmacy in Boyle Heights. And that's really kind of where I got my real journey into work ethic, being there on time, learning how to deal with customers, how to provide a service. And that was, I think, a really important trajectory for me because it allowed me to understand humans on a deeper level. And prior to that, when I was 17, my mom was working in as an extra. One of her friends was a casting director for entertainment and for movies. So I found myself on the set of Bedazzled, the movie from 2000s, and very quickly was just amazed and blown away by just, I guess, the spectacle, the magic, the things that we hear about Hollywood being, and just the magnitude of a production. And I'd never had any exposure to that before. So that, I think, to me, really opened my eyes and my curiosity to understanding what that was. And, growing up in Boyle Heights, growing up undocumented, I didn't really know how to get in, but I knew I had to, and that very quickly led me to seek mentorship from my counselor at San Gabriel Mission and really understand what was available, what were the options. And I think from there, I looked at programs at different colleges. And unfortunately, because of financial resources and not having a migrant status in this country, I very quickly realized that I had to get to it, and my easiest journey was going to Cal State LA, where it really launched and piqued my curiosity in entertainment. I studied broadcast journalism, and I very quickly knew that I wanted to be involved behind the cameras, and that later led to an internship at Univision, where I worked as a production coordinator for the morning show Despierta America, and really just, was on the ground with the news reporter, with the editor, and just driving around town. And again, that human connection, finding those stories that we wanted to tell and showcasing the power of the Latino community. And very quickly, I loved news entertainment. And I got a job at Primer Impacto, where I worked for a couple of years, and loved the news production, loved how fast-paced it was, but it was a freelance position and they weren't able to offer me a full-time position. And I knew that at that particular moment in time, I deserved a full-time position. And I went to a job fair of all things that was being hosted by a friend on behalf of ABC7, and had one piece of resume with me. And I went to the booth for Fox because I loved The Simpsons. I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I said, well, maybe there's an opportunity there. And I met an HR representative who, she and I, we we just like got along really, really well. And the next day she brought me in for an interview. So my first, real entertainment job was at Fox, working as the assistant in the music publishing department. And I, didn't have any knowledge of what music was, what the music industry was, but I was so thankful for that door opening up for me. And I learned the fundamentals of music and entertainment, and everything that I had wanted for the longest time was coming to life. And, I worked at Fox for 12 years and quickly rose through the reins, if you say, of the corporate ladder. And about 2.5 years ago, I made the change and I went over to Paramount Pictures as a vice president. And, after 2 years, I was promoted to senior vice president, I think as a result of the success that we had with the J Balvin SpongeBob collaboration that I'm very proud of, because it was one of the few times where I felt like Latinos were breaking in through the mainstream. So I was very, very glad we were able to do that as a team at Paramount.
Amazing. And what an amazing voice yours is in entertainment and in Hollywood. So now to the topic that we're here for today, Latina equal pay. From your perspectives, what is driving the Latina wage gap, and how do we overcome it? Maria Elena, can you start us off?
Sure. I think that there's obviously a number of different issues that are causing this big wage gap. It's actually, as vergonzoso, it's really embarrassing that here in this nation that the median earnings of Latinas is 42 cents to the dollar of white male men. White males, it's just, how could that be? 42 cents. We are the lowest when it comes to what it is. And that's why in October, we celebrate Latina wage gap because it takes us 10 months longer to get what a white male gets. And here we are in this greatest nation with all this opportunity that we all are grateful for. I think there's a couple of things. One is we are overrepresented in entire industries that are paid very low wages. Overrepresented. Now, that doesn't mean we should stop working in those fields. It just means that they are paid extremely low wages. So entire industries like the domestic workers that make it possible for many of us to be able to carry out our career and our jobs. You have childcare providers. How more important work is that, taking care of our children? You have garment workers. 45,000 garment workers in Los Angeles alone, the largest concentration in the country, responsible for this entire industry. Don't even get paid minimum wage. So you think about those hundreds of thousands of most Latina women, overrepresented entire industries. And then you have, as Areli and Angelica and others are talking about, where you're still pushing to open those doors. You're opening the doors still where we are underrepresented, and we should have far more representation in higher paid industries. So I think that those are at least two economic problems that cause this wage gap. And so what do we do about it? I know in our Latino Legislative Caucus, we have an initiative that was started by Assembly Member Lorena Gonzalez from San Diego. And it's called Unseen Latinas, in which we are looking to gather sufficient, research and information to show in all these industries, both where we're highly represented, where we're not, where we're kind of teachers, and then move forward the kind of legislation that should help and public policies that should help address that. So we are focusing as a Latino legislators, we are focusing. In fact, we make fun because the majority of Latino legislators in California are women. We just tipped it over. So we have that focus, and I'm really grateful to Assembly Member Gonzalez for leading the charge.
Wonderful. Well, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And Angelica, would you like to add to that in terms of maybe
Yeah,
your
so I
position in academia?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Senator Durasso just mentioned in terms of occupational segregation being one of the contributing factors. I also think about some of the institutional factors. So there's research. So in academia, in addition to teaching, I conduct extensive research. And so there's a lot of research that also finds that even when we control for occupations, even when we control for qualifications and skills and degrees, you still see these pay disparities. And some of the contributing factors at the institutional level has to do with gender and, racial biases. That's just the reality. Sometimes employers have certain stereotypes about individuals that come from certain ethnic groups, and they automatically assume that they're going to be willing to accept a lower wage relative to individuals from other groups. So there's definitely that in terms of institutional factors. So gender and racial biases at the individual level. One of the factors is quite, simply our inability or unwillingness to negotiate a salary. And that's something that I definitely emphasize in my line of work as a business school professor. I teach negotiations. So there's definitely systemic changes that are necessary. And I'm so thrilled to hear that Senator Durasso is part of this effort, right, to try to address some of the pay disparities. But it's also important for us as individuals to negotiate our compensation and to recognize that we deserve a lot better. And I think that culturally, there are also factors that contribute to our unwillingness to negotiate salaries, right? In our Latino community, there's also a very strong emphasis on being appreciative for any offers that we get, right? And if we try to ask for more, we might appear as being ungrateful. And our community is very hardworking, right? And another idea that's often reinforced in our culture is that we should just work hard and then trust that we're going to be paid fairly for having a strong work ethic. And in reality, that's not the case. Companies are all about protecting their bottom line. They're not really in the business in terms of paying people fairly. So we have to really advocate for ourselves at the individual level by asking or negotiating higher levels of compensation.
And you touched upon, Angelica, you touched upon a very important issue, and one that you mentioned is really uncomfortable for a lot of us, which is negotiating your own salary. So
absolutely.
It's really, I mean, I know from firsthand experience, I'm sure, many of us here know that. So what are some, and I'll start with you since you brought it up, but how do you address that negotiation? Like, what are some tips for negotiating your salary? How do we empower each other to have conversations around salary negotiation?
Yeah, so one of the biggest steps that we can take is just simply being aware that pay disparities exist and recognize that one of the reasons why they exist is because we're often unwilling to negotiate. And I often encourage, audience members or workshop participants to try to really examine the root of your hesitation. So what makes you uncomfortable about asking for higher pay? Because once we're able to recognize the reservations that we have, we're going to be in a much better position to counter that. So it's important for us as a community to be very open about, some of these ideas that are often reinforced about, simply being grateful for a salary, simply, relying that our hard work is going to pay off and that people are going to pay us whatever it is that we truly deserve. It's important for us to have those conversations and recognize that, yeah, we can still be grateful for the employment opportunities that were offered, and we can still ask for more because guess what? Other communities are doing it. Unfortunately, the Latino community, as Senator Durasso mentioned, and it's one of the primary objectives behind Latina Payday is just recognizing that we as a Latino community get paid the lowest, even when we're comparing ourselves to, African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, white Americans. So by simply recognizing where we are in terms of compensation, we should recognize that, hey, other people are asking for more, and guess what? We deserve more as well, and it's up to us to request it. So in terms of quick tips that we can do, one of the biggest steps that we can take is to research what companies are paying for the position that we've just been offered, and never sign an employment contract if you haven't had a chance to determine if what they're offering you is considered reasonable. And you won't know what's considered reasonable if you haven't done the research and figured out what other companies are paying for that position. So research, very important. And I also, I conduct very extensive workshops on this. So once you do your research, once you identify the salary that most companies pay for that position that you've just been offered, that should automatically be your bottom line. So it's what we call in negotiations your reservation price. So that should be the minimum that we should be willing to accept before we walk away and pursue another employment opportunity. But we should even go higher than what the market suggests is the going rate for that position. And you always want to start higher, at least 10 to 15% above whatever your research suggests should be your bottom line, because you should always assume that the other party is going to negotiate down. So always start even higher than what your market research suggests is the average pay for that position.
That's right. Never sell yourself short. And Areli, from the perspective of Hollywood, it seems like it's an industry that may be rife with inequalities around pay. What is your perspective on the Latina pay gap, or negotiating your salary generally, and empowering yourself to do so?
Yeah, I wish I had better news in the entertainment industry, but I'm sure Angelica can attest it's one of the lowest paying for Latinos and the lowest accessible for Latinos. So it's really important, I think, for communities, and we live in Los Angeles, where the studios are in our backyard, and the inequality and the inaccess of it really is really discouraging. But hopefully through workshops like these and just bringing the light to the availability and opportunities that exist within those industries, hopefully paves the way for people to pursue this, because it is a very fulfilling job. I'm very fortunate and very lucky, and I love what I do. But I've reached glass ceilings at every step of my career. And I think one of the most important things that I remind myself of is to know my worth, right? To know the quality of my work ethic, the resources that I bring, the bottom dollar of what my contribution is in terms of return of investment, right? And also not be afraid of taking meetings with other competitors and understanding what they're offering. I think for the longest time, I was afraid of that. I worked at Fox for 12 years, and I think I could have left a lot sooner, but I didn't, because there was a lot of great opportunities within that. But I could have jumped from there to another and probably achieved where I'm at now a lot quicker. But I think there's also a lot of cultural hesitation, the ability to say, I made it, I got in, wow, I'm so fortunate, I'm so lucky. But that's just the first step. And I think the second step is recognizing your value, your worth, and finding those opportunities where people are going to give you what you're worth and what you value. So I think in terms of negotiations, it's really, like Angelica said, coming in with a perspective of what you think you should be earning, and doing the research, going on Glassdoor, understanding what the salary range is. Networking, I think, is a really important part of any industry, but particularly the entertainment industry. It's so vital to learn what my counterparts do at their studios and what they're getting paid. I think pay transparency is also something that is very limiting. The inability to really have honest conversations with my male white counterparts about what they're earning, and I think demystifying that element, I think, will help, close that gap a lot quicker.
Thank you. Yeah, and the idea that's so important of knowing that you have options, and realizing that is the idea that oh yes, you're grateful for where you are, but you got there because you worked hard. And if that position is, you're reaching a ceiling there, or it's not satisfying you, you can advocate for yourself, but you can also, you have options. You can also look elsewhere. That's important too. And so I'll start with you, Areli, on this one too. So as a woman in a leadership role, how do you leverage your influence to level the playing field?
Well, I think, doing things like these are really important, having transparency in conversations, but also advocating for mentorship and sponsorship is something that's really important. At Paramount Pictures, we have just developed a sponsorship program where, executives like myself get paired up with senior leadership, and we have a direct access to being in the room when we're not there, having somebody advocating on our behalf, providing access that we normally would not have within our current roles. And I think that, understanding what that looks like and having advocacy within your organization is really, really vital. So taking, I think, those opportunities and sharing them with other people, and hopefully to start, kind of the snowball effect that if someone's doing it, maybe it starts to, shift the conversation and allow others to see the benefits of that.
Thank you. And Maria Elena, how do you leverage your leadership role to level the playing field?
Yeah, there's no doubt that without women like Areli, Angelica, yourself, Emily, without individuals that have the courage to speak out and to raise the issues, we need you all, but we also need collective action. Without the combination of the two, then we can't have the impact that we need. If it was left just to collective action without strong leadership spokespeople, then it would just be a push. It wouldn't result in as much. But we need both, and I say that because in my experience and in the history of this nation, without collective action, women would not even have the right to vote. And so we know that it takes a push, it takes collective action, and we should all be connecting with each other to be able to do that. And collective action then results in public policies that for those businesses, for those industries, for those employers who, there are those who do it on their own. It's the right thing to do, but then there's obviously a significant number that either refuse to do it or don't know how to do it. Whatever the issue is, it's not being done. And so we need public policies that require transparency. We need public policies that sometimes force changing an industry's model, because a lot of industry models took advantage of lower wages, took advantage of paying women or people of color lower wages. And we have to change that through public policy because it's not being done. So I think it's, we have incredible examples of collective action, incredible examples of legal litigation. So I think in a movement where we want to have impact in a bigger way. Someone reminded me the other day that if we go at this rate with the medical profession, not including Latinos as doctors, nurses, whatever, administrators, it would take us 100 years at the pace that we're going to get parity with our population. I don't know the numbers for the other industries we're talking about, but I certainly know that it's way, way, way below what it should be. So we need to do much more scalable, get real scale results sooner than later, because this is, I'm sorry, but it's just BS. It's just total BS to have a few here and there. At the same time that I have enormous respect for those individual women that are out there in the front lines. We need to push in a bigger way.
That's right. It's that idea that the individual leadership and collective action. Yes, we're pushing, but that collective action is so important. And Angelica, do you have anything to add to that idea of leveraging your leadership role, but also making sure that the institutions are following behind you?
Absolutely. I totally agree with what's been mentioned. I think one thing that we could also do in terms of policies is actually requiring companies to ensure pay equity among their employees, and we should also require that they have greater pay transparency. And it's so bizarre, right? Because the Equal Pay Act was passed in, what was it, 1964? So that at the federal level, like all employees, right, men and women that are performing the same work should be getting paid the same amount, but they're actually not. And it's just been astonishing how many, especially in the private sector, how many companies get away with paying their employees different levels of compensation, even though they're performing the same work. I actually just did a presentation for Mattel, the toy company. So it's one of the exemplary, I mean, they have other issues, but it's one of the exemplary Fortune 500 companies because they actually have ensured pay equity. So literally all employees at Mattel that perform the same work are getting paid the same. And they have achieved not just pay equity nationally, but also globally. So across all of their Mattel branches. So greater pay transparency would be a policy that I think we should be focusing on implementing. And then in terms of just what I do on an individual level is I do the negotiations workshops, and I also research and present on the imposter syndrome. So the imposter syndrome is another factor that I have found in my research that keeps people from negotiating for a higher salary. So I'm not sure how many of you may be familiar with the imposter syndrome, but it basically refers to feelings of inadequacy that individuals experience. So people may feel incompetent, unintelligent, and they have this fear that other people around them are going to discover that they actually don't belong in the positions that they occupy. So they may think to themselves, I got this job, or I got into this university, I got this award because I was just lucky, or I just happened to know the right people, or they just needed a woman or a person of color. And so what I have found is that, and so in my research and in the presentations that I deliver, I really focus on how these imposter feelings are being triggered by our environments, by the organizations that we're in. And I think it's just a powerful tool for us to have, to be aware of how the environment is making us feel like imposters, because those imposter feelings are what's actually keeping us from advocating for ourselves and asking for higher pay. So those are the two things that I do. I deliver negotiation presentations on how to improve your employment offer. And then I also present on the imposter syndrome, which is a barrier to negotiating.
And then just the question of education, I think, is it's an important one. When it comes to thinking about the how it relates to wage parity. How should we be looking at educational attainment as it relates to wages? And I throw it out to the group. Maybe Angelica, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, knowledge is power, and it sounds so cliche, but it's very true. So I encourage people to, obviously pursue higher education, get a graduate degree if possible, because bachelor degrees are no longer enough in certain industries. And if you want to move up, if you want to advance in your organization, and if you're aspiring for executive or higher level positions, it's going to be important to have, certain qualifications and certain degrees under your belt. So I would say that one of the things, going back to negotiations, is you can use those academic degrees or those certifications that you have as leverage in negotiations. So try your best to quantify what those degrees are worth and use that to help you determine what you should be asking for when you're applying for a job.
And is there anything, Areli or Maria Elena, is there anything that the collective movement should be doing in terms of the education vis-a-vis wage parity?
Well, if I could just jump in real quick on that. Yes, the additional level of using our educational opportunities is that we have to have the same access to the educational opportunities so that we could take full advantage and go as high as we want. We passed a bill on, graduate study students having access, undocumented, having the same access to loans and financial aid. There are so many smaller but bigger things. Not having access to broadband. Think about how our children lost learning opportunities during that time. So we had Senator Gonzalez from Long Beach pushed really hard for our broadband and investment, that it had to have a special targeting of our communities, low income communities, to be able to give that broadband. That makes a huge difference. Imagine being so behind, not just in education, but in this world of technology. And our girls especially need to know that they have the same capacity, the same intelligence to learn and go into technology the way that you all described here. So I think we have to, as a community, demand the higher access to education, and then just keep at it, using the education to demand the same salaries that men get, or that white men get. We're at this point where we're still having to not prove ourselves, but having to fight for what should be so common sense.
Absolutely. And Areli, from where you sit in your
also just like really great insight to learn from these two women. And one of the things that I think is also very important is financial literacy. And it's something that I didn't have access to growing up, and probably made a lot of mistakes with money management because I didn't know how to do it. I was never taught how to save. I was never taught how to invest. And I think that that's a big area where Latinos also, suffer from that lack of information. And I think as industries change, I also see, the opportunity for us to be part of those conversations and teach our young kids how to save money, how to invest, how compound interest work, which is something that I recently have learned, and I'm in my late 30s through TikTok, right? And I think that there's an amount of information at our disposal with technology, and understanding how to use those resources, those tools, to really better ourselves and create those opportunities for financial growth and financial wealth. So I think financial education is something that's really important as well.
That's and it's an interesting connection there on technology, because as you mentioned, technology is a great equalizer in that we all have access to that information. But as Maria Elena said, you need access to technology. And as the pandemic has shown, there's an inequality in broadband access that's become so apparent this year in terms of the differences of who has access to the technology. And so, I guess I'd love to hear how you're feeling 20 months into this pandemic. What have you learned about yourselves from the pandemic? And I guess I'd like to focus on, what positives you think have come out of this year, although we know there have been incredible challenges, and how do we move forward together? So what have you learned about yourselves, and how do we move forward in a positive way from this experience? Areli, can we start with you?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think that the pandemic has really taught me to approach my life in a more balanced way. I think I've been working really hard in the game, as they say, and hustling every day, running from one meeting to another to a show, to maintain a level of relevance, I suppose. And I think when everything shut down, it forced us all to do things differently and do them in a way that is actually very healthy, and also made me realize that my job could be done without having to stress myself out every single day. So the ability to have a little bit more of that work-life balance and, looking at it as a gift of time, which we've never really had, to learn the things that we're curious about. And I think that's one thing I encourage our youth is to be curious and to remain that curiosity even into your late age and take the opportunities to keep growing and learning. But I think that's one of the resilience really of how we're able to, kind of compartmentalize all of our different emotions throughout this whole thing and still keep developing. So I think that's been the work-life balance, I think is probably the biggest learning thing for me, which has been great.
And Maria Elena, what have you learned about yourself during this pandemic?
Well, it's more, I think, what I've learned that the pandemic raised the issues of working people. We created a new term called essential workers, which is supposed to, remind us all to appreciate the value of the work that's being done in certain sectors. A lot of those sectors were primarily women. 4 times as many women lost their jobs as men did. So what's wrong with our economy that more women are losing their jobs, more women are less likely to be returned to those jobs? As we saw the first big recovery, it was men who got their jobs back and women didn't. There's something wrong with the system when that happens. So the new appreciation that we have for essential workers, for home care workers, for childcare workers, for teachers, for nurses, that I hope to sustain that. I hope we don't just in the moment of the crisis of the pandemic say, that's great, I really love you, I really appreciate you. But as it begins to, as we begin to get through it, then what happens? What happens to all those women who gave so much of themselves, the domestic women who were allowed us to be able to continue our jobs either remotely or not. So that, do promotoras, beautiful women who do this healthcare work for us, going door to door, talking to people one-on-one, giving them the resources that they need. Promotoras, are we going to continue to value them? Home care workers, are we going to continue to value them? Farm workers, all the women in the fields who here in, in northern, not here, but in Northern California with the smoke that they had to endure while they were picking all the fruits and vegetables. So those are the things that I'm hopeful that we continue to elevate their value to the economy, their value to our communities, how much they contribute. We got to keep that going. And part of the way of showing appreciation is give them the wages that they deserve, give them the benefits that they deserve, so that they don't have to wait 1 or 2 more generations in order to catch up with other communities.
That's right. This pandemic has definitely showed us how much we rely on wage earners who should be earning more in that category of essential workers, as you mentioned. And Angelica, any thoughts on the pandemic and moving forward?
No, I completely agree with everything that Areli and Senator Durasso have mentioned at the macro level. Just on a personal level, I have just been, dealing with grief during most of the pandemic. So mom, she had severe health complications for years now, and she was first hospitalized last March. So right when the pandemic hit, she was in the hospital, and yeah, it was just very difficult with all of the restrictions that they had for visitors. Thank God, she ended up coming home, and I spent the entire past year just being there with her. So although the pandemic, I think there was a lot of issues that arose as a result of it. Going back to Areli's earlier point, I think it definitely gave us the gift of time, and I greatly appreciate having all of that time with mom during her final months. So yeah, on a personal level, she was my everything. So I've just been dealing with the grief.
Oh, what a difficult time.
Yeah.
Well, what, so out of this moment of grief, what, because you're all such, such inspiring leaders. And you are also some of the only Latina women in your current positions. And we know that collective action needs to happen. But what do you give, what advice do you give to the high school students we have listening to us, the many, many, many high school students we have listening to us who want to enter those spaces? What advice can you give to them? Maria Elena, can you start us off?
Well, as I said at the beginning, is learn to work really hard, give it your all, todas las ganas que puedan, échenle todas las ganas. In this world, you're not going to get what you need, what you deserve as a human being, unless you put your all into it. Put your all into it to, whether it's studying for a particular field, whether you're in that field and you deserve to get more. It's not, no cae del cielo. It just doesn't fall on your lap. You have to really want it, fight for it. And also is, don't forget your roots. When you've succeeded, you gotta bring other people along. We've gotta continue to make good change for our community, and keep that hope, going. But don't forget your roots. The most embarrassing thing is someone who's successful and then, does nothing for anybody else and just goes off into their world of success. So I really urge all of you, continue to do it if you already are, but échenle ganas and fight hard for our communities.
Yeah, and échenle ganas. That's good. Areli, any words to add?
Yeah, I think, knowing your worth is something that you're gonna learn as you get older. And I, relate to the imposter syndrome that Angelica spoke about so eloquently. It's something that I thought was only something I experienced personally. I never knew that there was a term for this thing, so it becomes very isolating and it becomes very self-limiting. So I think the importance of having minor achievements, and it doesn't matter how big or small, any achievement that you've had, it's easy for us to compare ourselves to everybody else, but compare yourself to yourself and who you were the day before. And I think those are the little milestones that we need in order to start to realize how valuable we are to our communities, to the industries that we enter. So I think it's important to remind ourselves that what we're accomplishing every single day is very, very important. And don't forget those kind of little lessons that we learn every day.
Yeah, that's right. And Angelica, what about you?
I would simply encourage everybody to not be afraid to enter fields or spaces where we are underrepresented. And just recognize that even though there might not be other people around who look like us, it doesn't mean that you don't belong. You certainly do. And it's up to individuals like all of you to serve as trailblazers, because as the saying goes, if not us, then who, right? And if not now, then when? So definitely encourage everybody to consider going into those uncharted paths.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I am inspired today. And I love it that this is at the start of the day, because I feel good for the rest of the day. And I hope everyone out there too, and you start your school day, with inspiration for the future. You don't forget your roots. You don't forget where you came from. You also don't forget where you're going. Thank you, all of you. This was very inspiring. But before we conclude, I'm going to turn it back to Brenda.
Yes, thank you, Emily. Thank you to our amazing panelists for your time, participation, and inspiration. Wow, Latinas are such trailblazers. These mujeres are setting their own path and really setting up our future generations to really understand what leadership looks like, right? In these roles that they can assume in the future. I'm incredibly grateful for their time, for your time, Emily, to be able to share space with us in this way, because it's incredibly important to uplift and hear the stories that are often unheard, but are just as powerful. For our viewers watching, please visit us on our website, www.ymcala.org, for upcoming opportunities to engage, I want to again thank you all for joining us, and Comerica Bank, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, YMCA.
Bye.